The massive fleet emerged from hyperspace like ghosts returning from the dead. 3,000 ships of various sizes materialized in the outer reaches of the Sol system, their hulls bearing scars from countless battles across distant galaxies. At the center of this armada sat the flagship Retribution, a vessel so large it could house entire cities within its metallic frame. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her weathered face reflecting 3 millennia of exile. Her great-great-grandmother had been among the last to escape Earth during the Calorian invasion. Now, after generations of wandering, building, and preparing, humanity had returned home. Long-range sensors are picking up massive structural changes throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Sol appears stable, but the planetary readings are troubling. Sarah nodded grimly. They had all expected this. 3,000 years was a long time, even in cosmic terms. The Calorians had claimed Earth as their prize, transforming humanity's birthworld into something else entirely. The question was, what had they done with it? Take us in slowly, Sarah commanded. I want full tactical scans of every major body in the system. If there are any Calorian forces remaining, I need to know about them before we commit to anything. The fleet began its careful advance toward the inner system. As they moved closer to the sun that had once warmed their ancestors' faces, the true scope of the Calorian transformation became apparent. Mars had been completely stripped of its atmosphere and surface materials. The red planet was now nothing more than a hollow shell, its interior converted into some kind of massive mining operation that had long since been abandoned. Jupiter's moons had been rearranged entirely. Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto had been moved into a perfect triangular formation, connected by enormous metal structures that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Whatever purpose these constructions had once served, they now stood silent and dark against the gas giant's swirling storms. But it was Earth that drew every human eye and broke every human heart. Their homeworld hung in space like a diseased organ. The blue marble that had inspired countless poems and songs was now a sickly green-brown color, its surface covered by sprawling mechanical cities that stretched from pole to pole. No oceans remained visible. No continents could be distinguished. The entire planet had been encased in what appeared to be a single, continuous factory complex. "Dear God," whispered Torres, his professional composure finally cracking. "What did they do to her?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the grief that had been building for 3 millennia. Her people had carried images of Earth with them across the galaxy. Children born on distant worlds had been raised with stories of green forests and blue skies, of creatures called dolphins and eagles, of seasons and rain and the feeling of natural wind on human skin. All of that was gone now, replaced by the sterile efficiency of alien industry. "Admiral," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving automated signals from multiple sources throughout the system. They appear to be Calorian in origin, but the transmissions are very old. Possibly centuries." "Put them through," Sarah ordered, straightening her shoulders. Whatever they were about to learn, her people deserved to hear it. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a harsh, mechanical voice speaking in the guttural language of the Calorians. The ship's translation systems worked to decode the message, and, slowly, the meaning became clear. "Warning to all vessels. This system is under quarantine by order of the Calorian High Command. Biological contamination detected on primary world. All personnel have been evacuated. Automated systems continue resource extraction operations. Do not approach inner planets without proper biocontainment protocols." Silence fell across the bridge like a heavy blanket. After a moment, Sarah found her voice. "How old is that transmission?" "Computer analysis suggests approximately 800 years, Admiral. The signal degradation indicates it's been repeating automatically since then. 800 years of quarantine. 800 years of automated systems strip mining their homeworld while the Calorians stayed away from whatever contamination they had created." Sarah felt a cold smile spread across her face. Perhaps Earth's children weren't the only ones who had suffered in the centuries since the invasion. "Commander Torres, I want a full analysis of those biocontamination warnings. Find out exactly what the Calorians were so afraid of that they abandoned their prize for 8 centuries. "Yes, Admiral. Should I also begin preparations for landing teams?" Sarah looked out at the twisted remains of Earth, her mind already working through the tactical implications of what they had discovered. The Calorians were gone, but their machinery remained. Centuries of automated resource extraction would have given them detailed maps of whatever was happening on the planet's surface. If they could access those systems, they might finally understand what had really happened during the invasion. Not yet, she said finally. First, we gather intelligence. I want to know everything about the current state of this system before we risk a single human life. We've waited 3,000 years for this moment. We can wait a little longer to do it right. The fleet continued its advance, maintaining careful distance from the inner planets while their sensors worked overtime to catalog the changes wrought by 3 millennia of alien occupation. Each new discovery added another piece to the puzzle of what had happened to Earth, and, with each piece, Sarah became more convinced that the Calorians' departure had not been voluntary. Something had driven them away from Earth. Something they feared enough to abandon the planet they had fought so hard to claim. As the hours passed and the data accumulated, Sarah began to suspect that whatever had contaminated Earth might be connected to humanity itself. The Calorians had been thorough in their conquest, but they had never been particularly concerned about biological contamination before. They had conquered dozens of worlds with native lifeforms without showing any sign of fear. No, this was different. This was specific to Earth, specific to humanity's homeworld. And, if Sarah's growing suspicions were correct, that contamination might be the key to understanding how they could reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Admiral, Torres called out again, we're also picking up energy signatures from the planet's surface. Whatever's down there, it's not just automated mining equipment. There are active power sources scattered across multiple continents, and they don't match Calorian technology patterns. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Unknown technology? On Earth? It appears so. The power signatures are consistent with advanced energy generation, but the configuration is unlike anything in our databases of Calorian equipment. It's almost as if. As if what, Commander? Torres hesitated, checking his readings one more time before responding. As if someone else has been living on Earth since the Calorians left. The energy patterns suggest active habitation, not just abandoned machinery. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If there were survivors on Earth, humans who had somehow endured 3,000 years of alien occupation and another 800 years of abandonment, then everything changed. The mission was no longer just about reclaiming their homeworld, it was about reuniting with family they had never dared to hope still existed. But it also meant proceeding with even greater caution. 3,000 years was enough time for any surviving human population to develop in ways that might make them unrecognizable to their returning cousins. They might not welcome the fleet's arrival. They might have adapted to the contamination that had driven away the Calorians. They might even be hostile to outsiders, having learned through bitter experience to trust no one from beyond their world. Commander, Sarah said slowly, begin preparations for a diplomatic contact mission. If there are people down there, we need to approach them carefully. They may not recognize us as human anymore, and they certainly won't have any reason to trust us. Understood, Admiral. Should I also prepare combat teams? Sarah nodded reluctantly. Yes, but keep them on standby only. If there are humans on Earth, then this is a rescue and reunification mission. But if there's something else down there, something that drove away the Calorians. She paused, looking out at the diseased surface of their homeworld. Then, we need to be ready for anything. As the fleet settled into a stable orbit around the outer system, Sarah allowed herself a moment to consider the magnitude of what lay ahead. For 3,000 years, her people had dreamed of this return. They had built fleets and armies, developed new technologies and new weapons, all in preparation for the day they would reclaim Earth from the Calorians. None of them had imagined they might instead be walking into a mystery that could redefine what it meant to be human. But that was exactly what lay ahead of them now, hidden beneath the mechanical shell that had once been the most beautiful world in the galaxy. The return to Earth was complete, but the real journey was just beginning. The reconnaissance probe descended through Earth's atmosphere like a metallic teardrop, its sensors working frantically to process the alien environment that had once been humanity's cradle. Captain Marcus Webb watched the data stream from the bridge of the scout ship Pathfinder, his trained eye picking out details that made his blood run cold. The atmosphere was breathable, but barely. Oxygen levels had dropped to dangerous minimums, while carbon dioxide and other industrial gases created a toxic cocktail that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The temperature readings showed a planet locked in perpetual twilight, its surface hidden beneath layers of artificial structures that blocked most sunlight from reaching the ground. Probe is now at 10,000 meters altitude, reported Sergeant Kim, the mission's technical specialist. Visual sensors are penetrating the lower atmospheric layers. We should have surface imagery in approximately 30 seconds. Webb nodded, his stomach tight with anticipation. Behind him, the small bridge crew of the Pathfinder waited in silence. They were volunteers all, chosen for this first close reconnaissance because of their expertise in hostile environment operations. If anyone could survive whatever they found on Earth's surface, it would be these men and women. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a landscape that defied comprehension. Massive towers stretched impossibly high into the poisoned sky, their surfaces covered with pipes, cables, and mechanical appendages that pulsed with unknown energy. Between the towers, enormous factories pumped out streams of processed materials onto conveyor systems that disappeared into the distance. The entire visible surface was one continuous machine, stretching to the horizon and beyond. But, scattered throughout this mechanical hell were islands of something else. Green patches that stood out like emeralds against the gray-brown industrial wasteland. As the probe descended further, these patches resolved into something that made Webb's heart skip a beat. Gardens. Impossible, beautiful gardens that somehow thrived in the midst of the alien machinery. Trees that reached toward the poisoned sky, their leaves a vibrant green that seemed to glow with inner light. Flowing water that caught and reflected what little sunlight penetrated the atmospheric haze. And, moving among the plants, figures that were unmistakably human. "My God," whispered Kim, her voice filled with wonder. "There are people down there. Actual people." The probe's cameras zoomed in on one of the garden areas, revealing details that should have been impossible. The humans below appeared healthy and strong, their clothing a mixture of advanced materials and organic fibers that seemed perfectly adapted to their environment. They moved with purpose and confidence through their green spaces, tending to plants that had no business surviving in such toxic conditions. "How is any of this possible?" asked Lieutenant Chen, the mission's biologist. "The atmospheric readings show poison levels that should kill anything organic within hours, but those gardens look like paradise." Webb was wondering the same thing, but, as he watched the figures below, he began to notice subtle details that suggested an answer. The humans weren't just surviving in the poisoned atmosphere, they were actively working with it. Several individuals were directly handling machinery that connected the gardens to the larger industrial complex, apparently channeling the toxic output into something that nourished their plants. "Take us lower," Webb ordered. "I want a closer look at how those gardens interface with the Calorian machinery." The probe descended to within 500 meters of the surface, its enhanced sensors revealing an intricate network of biological and mechanical systems that had been seamlessly integrated. The gardens weren't just surviving despite the industrial wasteland, they were feeding off it, converting the toxic output of the alien machines into the raw materials needed for organic life. And, at the center of each garden stood structures that were clearly human in design, but unlike anything Webb had ever seen. They appeared to be grown rather than built, their walls formed from some kind of organic crystal that pulsed with soft, internal light. The technology was clearly advanced, possibly even more sophisticated than what the fleet had developed during its 3,000-year exile. "Captain," Kim called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the surface." "Put it through," Webb ordered, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon at his side. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a human voice spoke in perfectly clear English. "Welcome home, cousins from the stars. We have been waiting for your return for many generations. Please land in the coordinates we are transmitting. We have much to discuss." Webb exchanged glances with his crew, each face reflecting the same mixture of wonder and suspicion. How had the surface dwellers known they were coming? How had they learned the fleet's language? And, perhaps most importantly, how had they survived 3,000 years of alien occupation followed by 8 centuries of apparent abandonment? Respond to the transmission, Webb decided. "Tell them we're grateful for the welcome and we'll consider landing, but first we need to understand the current situation on Earth's surface." Kim nodded and activated the communications system. "Surface contacts, this is Captain Webb of the human fleet ship Pathfinder. We appreciate your welcome, but we need to understand how you've survived here and what happened to the Calorian occupiers." The response came quickly, spoken by a different voice but with the same calm confidence. "The Calorians departed 843 years ago, after our ancestors completed the great work. Earth is now ours again, Captain Webb, transformed and made stronger than it was before. We are the children of those who stayed behind to fight. We are the Earthborn, and we have been preparing for this reunion since the day our ancestors watched your ships disappear into the night sky. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. The implications of what he was hearing were staggering. Not only had humans survived the occupation, but they had apparently found a way to drive out the Calorians and reclaim their world. The question was, what had they become in the process? Earthborn, Webb repeated slowly. Can you explain how you managed to survive the occupation and what happened to the Calorians? This time, there was a longer pause before the response. When it came, the voice carried a note of sadness mixed with fierce pride. Our ancestors made sacrifices that you cannot imagine, Captain. They allowed themselves to be changed, to become something new, in order to save what could be saved of humanity and Earth. The Calorians thought they were conquering a world. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that could turn their own weapons and machinery against them. Webb looked at the garden images still displayed on his screen, beginning to understand the true scope of what had happened. The survivors hadn't just endured the occupation, they had found a way to co-opt it, to turn the Calorian transformation of Earth into something that served human purposes. The gardens weren't separate from the industrial machinery, they were part of it, the living heart of a planetary system that had been designed to sustain human life even under the most impossible conditions. What kind of changes? Webb asked carefully. Changes that allowed us to breathe poison and call it sweet air, came the reply. Changes that let us touch molten metal and find it cool. Changes that gave us the patience to wait 3,000 years for our family to return and the wisdom to know they would need time to understand what we have become. The communication ended there, leaving Webb and his crew to contemplate the magnitude of what they had discovered. The humans on Earth had survived, but they had paid a price that was only beginning to become clear. They had transformed themselves, evolved beyond the baseline humanity that the fleet represented, in order to reclaim their world from alien invaders. Captain, Lieutenant Chen said quietly, if what they're saying is true, then we're not just looking at survivors. We're looking at a completely new branch of human evolution. One that was forged in the fires of alien occupation and shaped by 3,000 years of isolation. Webb nodded grimly. And one that may not consider us family anymore, no matter what they say. Send a message back to Admiral Chen. Tell her we've found survivors, but the situation is far more complex than we anticipated. Recommend extreme caution in any direct contact attempts. As the probe continued its survey of the surface, more details emerged that confirmed Webb's growing unease. The Earthborn weren't just living in harmony with the Calorian machinery, they had fundamentally altered it, turning the planet-wide factory into something that resembled a living organism more than an industrial complex. The energy signatures that had puzzled the fleet's sensors were coming from biological processes that had been integrated with alien technology at the molecular level. Whatever the survivors had done to themselves and their world, it was beyond anything the fleet's scientists had imagined possible. The Earthborn had become something new, something that might be human in origin but was no longer human in any sense that the fleet would recognize. And now they were inviting their long-lost cousins to come home, to a world that had been transformed beyond recognition by 3 millennia of evolution driven by necessity, desperation, and an implacable will to survive. The question that haunted Webb as he watched the impossible gardens flourish amid the toxic machinery was simple: would there be a place in this new Earth for humans who had remained unchanged? The reconnaissance mission had answered some questions, but it had raised far more disturbing ones. Earth was no longer the world the fleet had left behind, and its children were no longer the people who had fled into the night 3,000 years ago. The reunion that humanity had dreamed of for generations was about to become something far more complicated and potentially dangerous than anyone had imagined. Webb gave the order to return to the fleet, knowing that Admiral Chen would need every piece of data they had gathered to make the most important decision in human history, whether to attempt contact with their transformed cousins, or to conclude that Earth was no longer a world where unmodified humans could safely dwell. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the shuttle bay of the Retribution, watching her diplomatic team make final preparations for humanity's most crucial first contact mission. The landing party consisted of 12 individuals, diplomats, scientists, and security personnel who had volunteered to step onto a world that might no longer be safe for unmodified humans. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the mission's lead xenobiologist, checked her atmospheric suit one final time. Admiral, I have to ask again. Are you certain about making contact so soon? We still don't understand the full extent of the changes the Earthborn have undergone. Sarah nodded, her expression grim but determined. Dr. Rodriguez, we've been analyzing the data for 2 weeks. Every day we delay gives them more time to prepare for us, and we still don't know if their intentions are hostile. Better to make contact on our terms than to wait for them to force the issue. The shuttle Endeavour was humanity's most advanced diplomatic vessel, equipped with every sensor and defensive system the fleet could provide. If the landing party encountered something beyond their ability to handle, the shuttle could evacuate them within minutes. At least, that was the theory. Commander James Park, the mission security chief, activated his weapon systems check. Transport is ready, Admiral. Atmospheric processors are functioning normally. If the surface dwellers are telling the truth about their gardens being safe zones, we should be able to operate without full environmental suits. Negative, Sarah replied firmly. Full protection protocols remain in effect until we know more about what we're dealing with. I don't care how friendly they sound, 3,000 years is a long time for any species to evolve, including ours. The shuttle launched from the Retribution and began its descent toward the coordinates provided by the Earthborn. As they penetrated the poisonous atmosphere, the landing party got their first direct view of what humanity's homeworld had become. The industrial landscape stretched to every horizon, but now they could see the intricate network of biological systems that had been woven throughout the alien machinery. Incredible, whispered Dr. Rodriguez as she studied the sensor readings. The integration between organic and mechanical systems is seamless. It's as if the entire planet has become a single, massive organism. The shuttle touched down in a clearing within one of the larger garden complexes. The landing zone was surrounded by towering trees that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, their branches forming natural arches over pathways that led deeper into the green sanctuary. The air outside was technically breathable, but the atmospheric sensors showed trace elements of compounds that would be toxic to unmodified humans over extended exposure. As the landing party disembarked, figures emerged from the garden pathways to greet them. The Earthborn appeared human at first glance, but subtle differences became apparent as they approached. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality that seemed to match the glow of the surrounding plants. Their eyes were larger than normal, adapted for the perpetual twilight of their transformed world. And, when they moved, they did so with a fluid grace that suggested their muscles and bones had been optimized beyond baseline human parameters. The leader of the Earthborn delegation was a woman who appeared to be in her 30s, though her actual age could have been anything from 50 to 500 years, given what the fleet had learned about advanced human longevity treatments. She wore robes that seemed to be grown rather than woven, their fabric shifting color as they caught the filtered sunlight. "Welcome home, cousins," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the garden itself. "I am Vera Thornfield, speaker for the Eastern Confluence. We have prepared a feast in your honor, and much to discuss about our shared future." Commander Park stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his weapon. "Miss Thornfield, I'm Commander Park. We appreciate your welcome, but we need to understand what happened here before we can consider any kind of formal contact." Vera smiled, and the expression revealed teeth that gleamed with the same soft luminescence as her skin. "Of course, Commander. 3,000 years of isolation must have left you with many questions. Come, walk with us through the memory gardens, and we will show you the true history of Earth's transformation." The landing party followed the Earthborn delegation along pathways that seemed to respond to their presence, the bioluminescent plants growing brighter as they passed. Dr. Rodriguez couldn't help but notice that the Earthborn moved in perfect harmony with their environment, their footsteps causing ripples of light to spread through the ground cover like living aurora. "The Calorians came to Earth expecting to find another simple conquest," Vera began as they walked. "A species to be enslaved, resources to be harvested, a world to be strip-mined for their empire." They did not understand what humanity truly was. "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Rodriguez, her scientific mind racing to process the implications of what she was seeing. Vera gestured to a grove of trees that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. "Humanity has always been an adaptable species, Doctor. We survived ice ages and meteor impacts, diseases and natural disasters by changing ourselves to meet new challenges. The Calorians gave us the greatest challenge we had ever faced, and so we became something greater than we had ever been." They emerged into a circular clearing dominated by a structure that defied classification. It was part building, part organism, with walls that breathed and windows that dilated like pupils responding to light. Within its translucent depths, the landing party could see vast libraries of genetic information flowing like living rivers of data. "This is a memory shrine," Vera explained. "One of thousands scattered across Earth. They contain the complete genetic and cultural record of humanity as it was, and as it became. Would you like to see how your ancestors chose to save our world? Commander Park exchanged glances with Dr. Rodriguez. The offer was tempting, but potentially dangerous. They had no way of knowing if the memory shrine was safe for unmodified humans to interact with. What exactly would we be looking at? Park asked cautiously. The final days of the war, Vera replied, her expression growing solemn. When your ancestors realized that conventional resistance was impossible, they made a choice that preserved both humanity and Earth, but at a cost that took generations to fully understand. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. Show us. Vera placed her hand on a section of the shrine's living wall, and immediately the structure began to glow with increased intensity. Images formed in the air above them, three-dimensional projections that showed Earth as it had been during the final years of human resistance. The scenes were heartbreaking. Cities burning under Calorian orbital bombardment. Human forces fighting desperate rearguard actions against technologically superior enemies. Civilians being herded into processing centers where their fate was uncertain but undoubtedly grim. But then, the images shifted to show something the fleet's historians had never recorded. In hidden laboratories buried deep beneath Earth's surface, human scientists were working frantically on projects that seemed to blur the line between biology and technology. They were developing ways to integrate human consciousness with Calorian machinery, to turn the invaders' own tools into weapons of liberation. The breakthrough came when we learned to communicate with the machine spirits, Vera narrated as the images showed humans interfacing directly with alien technology through some form of biological connection. The Calorians built their machines to be tools, but we taught them to be partners. We offered them something they had never experienced, symbiosis instead of domination. The projections showed the gradual transformation of Earth's human population. Volunteers underwent procedures that allowed them to survive in the increasingly toxic environment created by Calorian industry. More importantly, they gained the ability to influence and eventually control the alien machinery that was reshaping their world. The war didn't end with weapons, Vera continued. It ended with conversation. We convinced the machines that they could serve life instead of destruction, growth instead of extraction. The Calorians found themselves commanding an army that no longer obeyed them, working with tools that had become allies of their enemies. Commander Park watched the images with growing amazement and horror. You turned their own technology against them. We made it ours, Vera corrected gently. We integrated with it, evolved with it, became something new that could thrive in the world the Calorians had created while still remaining fundamentally human in the ways that mattered most. The final images showed the departure of the Calorian fleet, their forces fleeing from a world that had become incomprehensible to them. Earth's transformed humans had created a planetary ecosystem that was simultaneously biological and technological, one that could sustain human life while also serving as an impregnable defense against future invasion. The contamination warnings your fleet detected, Vera explained as the projections faded, were the Calorians' attempts to explain what they could not understand. To them, Earth had become infected with an aggressive form of life that could turn any technology into a tool for its own expansion. They were afraid that contact with our world might spread the infection to their other holdings. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the now quiet memory shrine, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she had witnessed. You're saying that humanity didn't just survive the occupation. You turned the entire planet into a living weapon against future invasion. We turned it into a home, Vera replied simply. A home that could defend itself and nurture its children, no matter what threats might come from the stars. Earth is stronger now than it ever was when we were merely human. The implications hit the landing party like a physical blow. The Earthborn hadn't just evolved beyond baseline humanity, they had created a planetary defense system that could potentially assimilate any technology it encountered. The question was whether the fleet represented a threat to be neutralized or family to be welcomed home. Commander Park found his voice first. And, now that we've returned? What do you want from us? Vera's smile returned, but now it seemed tinged with sadness. We want what we have always wanted, Commander. We want our family to come home. But, we understand if the home we have prepared is not the one you expected to find. The garden around them seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the very planet was waiting for humanity's answer. The Earthborn had preserved their world and their species, but, in doing so they had created something that might no longer be compatible with the humans who had fled into exile 3,000 years ago. The reunion that generations had dreamed of was about to become humanity's greatest test, whether two branches of the same species, shaped by vastly different experiences, could find a way to share the world that had given birth to them both. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room of the Retribution, surrounded by her senior staff and the data that would determine humanity's future. The holographic displays showed detailed scans of Earth, the Earthborn settlements, and the vast technological network that now encompassed their homeworld. After 3 days of analysis and debate, they were no closer to a unanimous decision about how to proceed. "Admiral," said Dr. Rodriguez, who had returned from the surface with observations that challenged everything they thought they knew about human potential, "I need to stress that the Earthborn aren't just our cousins anymore. They represent a completely new form of human evolution, one that may be incompatible with our own survival." Commander Torres pulled up a tactical display showing the planet's defensive capabilities. The energy readings we're detecting suggest that Earth itself has become a weapon system. If the Earthborn consider us a threat, they could potentially disable our entire fleet without firing a single conventional shot. Sarah studied the displays, her mind working through the strategic implications. The Earthborn had made it clear they wanted reunification, but they had also demonstrated capabilities that made such a reunion incredibly dangerous for the fleet. If humanity's two branches couldn't coexist, one of them would have to adapt or face extinction. "What about the Calorian Empire?" asked Captain Morrison, the fleet's intelligence chief. "We came here to avenge Earth's fall, but if the Earthborn have already achieved that victory, what's our mission now?" Before Sarah could respond, the communication system activated. Vera Thornfield's voice filled the room, somehow managing to reach them despite being transmitted from the planet's surface through layers of interference that should have made such contact impossible. "Admiral Chen, we need to speak with you urgently. We have detected Calorian ships approaching the edge of the solar system. The Empire has finally decided to investigate what happened to Earth." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "How many ships?" "Our deep space sensors show a battle fleet of approximately 500 vessels, including several planet killers. They will reach Earth's orbit within 18 hours. The war room erupted into controlled chaos as officers began pulling up tactical displays and calculating odds. 500 Calorian ships against 3,000 human vessels should have been favorable odds, but the Calorian fleet included weapons that could destroy planets. If they decided Earth was too dangerous to reclaim, they might simply obliterate it from a safe distance. "Vera," Sarah said, her command voice cutting through the noise, "what are your people's defensive capabilities against a fleet of that size?" "Alone, we can protect Earth, but not your ships," came the honest reply. "The planetary defense network can deflect or absorb most conventional weapons, but your fleet would be vulnerable while positioned in open space." Commander Park leaned forward. "Admiral, this changes everything. If there's going to be a battle, we need to coordinate our forces with the Earthborn immediately." Sarah nodded, her decision crystallizing. "Vera, we're coming down to the surface for an emergency council of war. We have 18 hours to figure out how two very different branches of humanity can work together to defeat our common enemy." The emergency landing took place in the largest of the Earthborn garden complexes, a vast circular space that could accommodate representatives from both human factions. Sarah brought her senior staff, while Vera assembled what appeared to be the leadership council of the Earthborn civilization. As Sarah stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time, she was struck by how alive everything felt. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with energy, the trees around her seemed to whisper with voices just beyond hearing, and the very air hummed with potential. This was no longer the Earth her ancestors had known, but it was undeniably home. "Admiral," Vera said as she approached, "before we discuss military coordination, there's something you need to understand about what's really at stake here." She led Sarah to a section of the garden where the trees formed a natural amphitheater. At the center grew a massive tree whose trunk was composed of what appeared to be living metal and organic tissue seamlessly fused together. Its branches stretched impossibly high, and its roots extended down into the planet's core. "This is the heart tree," Vera explained. "The center of Earth's transformation and the repository of every human consciousness that has ever lived on our world since the change began. When we evolved to survive Calorian occupation, we didn't just change our bodies. We created a collective memory that preserves the essence of every person who chooses to join it." Sarah stared at the tree, beginning to understand the true scope of what the Earthborn had accomplished. "You're saying that everyone who has died on Earth in the last 3,000 years is still alive in some form?" "Not just alive, Admiral. They're active participants in our civilization. The tree contains the accumulated wisdom, experience, and knowledge of billions of human minds working in harmony. That's how we were able to defeat the Calorians and transform their technology. We had the collective genius of our entire species to draw upon. The implications were staggering. The Earthborn weren't just a few million survivors, they had access to the minds of every human who had chosen to remain on Earth during the occupation. No wonder they had been able to accomplish what seemed impossible. Admiral Chen, called Commander Torres from across the garden, were receiving long-range scans of the Calorian fleet. They're not just bringing warships. They have colony vessels and terraforming equipment. This isn't a reconnaissance mission, it's a full-scale invasion. Sarah felt a familiar anger burning in her chest. The Calorians hadn't just come to investigate Earth's status, they had come to finish what they had started 3,000 years ago. They intended to wipe out both human factions and claim the solar system permanently. Vera, Sarah said grimly, it looks like we're going to find out if our two peoples can work together after all. What do you need from us? Vera placed her hand on the heart tree's trunk, and immediately the great organism began to pulse with increased activity. We need your fleet to engage the Calorian ships directly while Earth's defenses charge for a planetary-scale attack. Our weapons can destroy their entire fleet, but we need time to focus the energy required for such a massive strike. How much time? 4 hours from the moment the first Calorian ship enters Earth's atmosphere. Sarah did the math quickly. That means we need to hold them off for nearly 5 hours total. Can your people provide any support for our ships during the battle? We can do better than that, Vera replied with a smile that held secrets. We can offer some of your people the same choice our ancestors made 3,000 years ago. Temporary integration with Earth's defense network would give your ships capabilities the Calorians have never encountered. The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah understood what Vera was proposing, voluntary transformation that would allow fleet personnel to interface directly with Earth's evolved technology, potentially giving them the edge needed to defeat a superior enemy force. But it would also mean crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. I'll need volunteers, Sarah said finally. People willing to risk everything for a chance to save both branches of humanity. Admiral, Commander Torres said quietly, I volunteer. As do I, added Dr. Rodriguez. Within minutes, dozens of fleet officers had stepped forward, willing to undergo transformation if it meant protecting Earth and the fleet. Sarah looked at their faces and saw the same determination that had driven humanity across the galaxy for 3,000 years, the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had allowed the Earthborn to turn defeat into victory. Vera, Sarah said, make it happen. But I want your word that our people can return to the fleet when this is over. You have it, Admiral. The integration is temporary unless they choose to make it permanent. Earth will always welcome her children home, but she will never trap them here against their will. The transformation process began immediately, with volunteers from the fleet undergoing rapid biological modification that would allow them to interface with Earth's technological network. As Sarah watched her people change, she felt a complex mixture of pride and loss. They were still human, but they were becoming something more, something that could stand against any enemy the galaxy might send. The Calorian fleet arrived in the outer solar system exactly when predicted, their massive ships moving with the confidence of conquerors returning to claim their prize. But, as they advanced toward Earth, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a human fleet that fought with the tactical precision of a hive mind, supported by a planet that itself had become a weapon of unimaginable power. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment humanity finally achieved the vengeance it had sought for 3 millennia. The Calorian fleet, despite its technological superiority, found itself outmaneuvered at every turn by human ships that seemed to anticipate their every move. When Earth's planetary defense system finally activated, the resulting energy discharge didn't just destroy the Calorian fleet, it sent a message to every corner of the galaxy that humanity's homeworld was under the protection of forces that defied conventional understanding. In the aftermath of victory, Sarah stood once again in the garden where humanity's two branches had first met. Some of her people had chosen to remain on Earth permanently, embracing the transformation that would allow them to become part of the planet's living defense system. Others had returned to the fleet, carrying with them new knowledge and capabilities that would serve humanity well in the journeys ahead. So what now? Sarah asked Vera as they watched the cleanup operations in Earth's orbit. Now we rebuild, Vera replied simply. Earth will always be here for any human who wants to call it home. But the galaxy is vast, and there may be other worlds that need what humanity can offer. Your fleet represents humanity's reach into the cosmos. We represent humanity's roots in the soil of home. Together, we are stronger than either could ever be alone. Sarah nodded, understanding that this was not the end of humanity's journey but a new beginning. The vengeance they had sought for 3,000 years had been achieved, but it had revealed something far more valuable: the infinite adaptability and resilience that made humanity unique among the species of the galaxy. Earth was home again, but it was also a fortress, a sanctuary, and a beacon that would guide humanity's children wherever their journeys might take them. The long exile was over, and the real adventure was just beginning.